Welcome into a new edition of the Sports Hub Patriots podcast. Another day at training camp, day 6 in the books. I'm Alex Barth, and to break it down with us is Phil Perry from NBC Sports Boston. Phil, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
So today was kind of a more tampered down practice. It seemed like, and we've seen them do this in the past. Yesterday they had the full pads and they were full go, and today was kind of a day to go back. Felt like it was kind of a day to go back through and work on whatever they saw on film between yesterday and today that they wanted to fix. Before we get to some of the competitive reps at the end of practice, what did you make of what they were working on today in some of those walkthrough type sessions?
Yeah, I thought it was a good opportunity for them. You take the pads off and you can get away from, running duo into the middle of the line, and you could start to throw it a little bit more, right? So I did anticipate before practice even started that we'd see them throw the ball down the field a little bit more, because they did throw it even with the pads on. They threw a little bit on Monday, but it was almost all, and you tell me if you saw anything differently, but to me, Alex, it was almost all bubble screens. It was a lot of screen game, and there was a lot of contact. You're using those pads, but it was the receivers and the DBs that were creating most of that contact. So I found that interesting on Monday. On Tuesday, we saw, I thought, some different stuff. We saw, a deep shot finally, like a true deep shot from Mac Jones to Kendrick Bourne that was not completed. But looked like Bourne had a step on Marcus Jones, and Mac Jones just overthrew him a little bit. We saw, a jump ball throw down the sideline to DeVante Parker. That's sort of the DeVante Parker special, but he was really quiet on Monday when the pads were on. I don't think we saw him even get a target in the few throws that they did make. So you saw a little bit of everything too, in that they worked in the middle of the field. They also worked in the red zone at the end of practice, which I thought was honestly the best part of practice for the offense. They did still work on the screen game. You saw a lot of the slip screen stuff, tight end screens to Ramondre Stevenson. It wasn't just the bubbles to the perimeter. So it was a good opportunity for them to work on a variety of different things within their passing game. And I thought the passing offense responded okay. I just thought it was sort of a mixed bag. I mentioned the deep overthrow to Bourne, but it did just feel like there were a handful of reps, Alex, where Mac really is dying to throw it down the field a little bit more. And he's not, and he's holding on to it, and he's checking it down to Ramondre Stevenson, because in my opinion, this is something that has been relatively predictable with this offense, but they don't have a lot of separators. So I just don't see a lot of people getting open out there, and it's led to some of these shorter kind of dink and dunk moments.
It's funny. It almost feels like their best separation isn't horizontal, it's vertical. A lot of people get on DeVante Parker that he doesn't have yards between him and the defensive back, and we saw it today, he went up over Christian Gonzalez to make a catch. Mac will throw the ball up, and Parker at 6'4" will go up and separate vertically. We've seen him do that kind of throughout camp. He's made a number of these sort of high point back shoulder fade catches, things like that. But is that sustainable as you go through a season? Like, what have you? I think his camp's been really interesting, because we've seen this. It wasn't just him. N'Keal Harry used to do this in the non-padded practices. He would go out there and moss guys like once or twice a day, and then obviously we know what happened when the pads came on and the season started. So it's kind of like, this is what Parker does, and it's cool to see him do it. But where should the expectations be for him based on the camp he's had?
I just think that's who he is, right? I'm not sure how much more than that he will do for them. I think you see with a lot of these kind of X receivers, and it's their conversation points that we hear around draft time. I'm sure you hear them too, and I'm sure I've been guilty of labeling guys in this way. But you see certain receivers that have sort of the DeVante Parker build. They're 6'4", they're 210, and they run 4 routes. Goes, hitches, slants, comebacks, and not much else, because that's essentially what a lot of college offenses are asking of their guys. I don't want to bury the man, because maybe he'll end up doing plenty for this offense, but I'm not sure DeVante Parker's route tree is even that diverse. You know what I mean? I mean, like, how many times have we seen him catch a slant and pick up a first down? Or how many times have we seen him run a deep over? and create some yards after catch. It feels like when they have an explosive pass play with him on the field, it's because he's out jumping someone in high point. He does it really well. I give him a lot of credit. There's just risk associated with those passes too that I think make them less dependable than some other types of throws. I mean, how many targets that went DeVante Parker's way last year ended up being intercepted? That's just sort of the nature, I think, of who he is. We know he doesn't separate. And that doesn't mean you're a bad player. DeAndre Hopkins doesn't separate either. I wanted the Patriots to sign DeAndre Hopkins because I think it would have made them a better offense. But he's not a true number one. He's an outside the numbers boundary X, but he's not a number one because I think he's pretty limited in what he's going to do for them.
Yeah, it's a good point. And, they're called 50-50 balls for a reason. And I know Parker says with him, it's more 80-20, but there were times last year, I think it was 4 of Mac Jones, 5 interceptions. I remember interceptions he had when he got hurt through the first 3 games. It was all but 1, I remember, were to DeVante Parker. What have you made of Mac so far? And we'll go through all the quarterbacks, but Mac Jones, a lot of people had today as his best day. I thought it was today or maybe Sunday. I also thought he was really good, but a lot of eyeballs on him. Where do you have him at so far?
Yeah, I think it's been good. I think, it's pretty clear who, it's very clear to me who the starter is and who the team is preparing to be the starter. It's Mac Jones. Outside of the occasional rep that Bailey Zappe might get with the first team offensive line, which he got 1 today that I could count in 11-on-11 periods. That's really the only indication that they might even be trying to get him some work with some of the top guys. So that's number one. But number two, I think they've shown progress from the start of camp to now. Again, I liked the red zone period today. Those, even if, they're not the most amazing looking completions, they're not always the prettiest. It might just be a swing pass to a back out of the backfield. It might just be a little in cut to Hunter Henry from 8 yards away. But any success in the red zone is success worth celebrating. And I've found it interesting that, the last couple of days that they've worked in the red zone, they have found some of these, whether it's Kevin Harris on a hot route, or today was Ramondre Stevenson on, it looked like a very similar type of play, walk-in touchdowns to both guys. Hunter Henry earlier in camp, Hunter Henry again today. There's these little celebrations, if you notice, Alex, after they are able to score in the red zone. And it doesn't look like much when he just dumps it to Ramondre Stevenson at the line of scrimmage. He just walks in. But there's little details that went into making that play a success that I'm sure they're talking about in meetings that they're going through and walkthroughs. And when you see it play out in a competitive period, like the ones that we've seen, you're getting little fist pumps. You're getting little high fives from Mac Jones seeking out whoever it was that ended up catching the pass. A little pep in the step of Mac Jones. We know he likes to dance a little bit on the field occasionally, even when he's just throwing on air. Like it, he'll make a throw to somebody on a deep over or something. If he hits him in stride, he'll do a little like 180 kind of spin. When you're seeing body language that looks like that, it's so different from what we saw a year ago. I do put some stock into that. I think they're feeling good about the progress that they've made. It has not been perfect by any stretch for the offense, and they have a long way to go, I think, in certain regards, like blitz pickup being maybe at the top of the list for me right now. But I think they think they're progressing. Are you sensing the same sort of confidence? Like, I think there's a level of confidence there with the offense that we haven't seen in over a year.
And I almost think you're seeing it happen in real time. I thought they started on Sundays when they first kind of backed it up from the red zone and started throwing. And some of it, like we talked about earlier, was guys not getting open, but it did feel a little bit like last year where Mac was holding the ball and maybe he wasn't testing some tighter windows, and the same sort of thing to start today. But then you got into that second deep passing period and he uncorked the deep one to Bourne. He had a nice throw. I want to say it was Mike Gesicki on an over route. One of the tight ends he hit on an over route for a good throw. And I almost feel like you can see him. The big thing for me with Mac coming into this camp was how quickly, if at all, will he unlearn some of the bad habits he picked up last year? How quickly will he, reset his internal clock and get comfortable again in the pocket and get on the same page with some of these receivers? And I do think that's starting to happen, and they have a long way to go with it. Like, I don't think they're game ready at this point, but let's say they're on like step 3 of 10, right? Just for arbitrary numbers. I don't even know that they got past step 1 last year. So to make the progress where they have, and maybe this would usually be like a spot where they're step 2. I think they're a little bit ahead of where they were. Like, it's tough to gauge for Mac his rookie camp, but relative to him being in that competition with Cam, I almost feel like he's a little ahead of where he was his rookie camp. But it's just to see the progress is encouraging. After last year, they were on square one throughout camp.
Yeah, I love that point. Like the point about unlearning bad habits. I think some of that can happen relatively quickly, and I bet if you were to ask him, he would agree, because I think some of those bad habits are a result of not having answers. You know, when you're panicked back there, you
Right.
I think he's got. Oh, sorry, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, we lost you there for a second. Set it up and it cut out, so drama builds.
So exactly as I planned it. Yeah. I think, listen, if you have answers, it just makes playing the position so much easier, right? It can be paralyzing if you're sitting back there. Oh, number one is taken away and we're seeing pressure. I wish we could have gone over this in the meetings this week, but the coaching staff didn't have the answers for me. Now, not only does Bill O'Brien have the answers after the fact if they see something in practice that day, but I think Bill O'Brien is doing everything he can, and this is probably just his coaching style. I haven't seen it in person since 2011, but I bet he's doing all he can to sort of head off those questions at the pass, right? So in between snaps, these little side sessions that receivers and tight ends are working with the quarterbacks, it's like he's not waiting for a series to end. He's not waiting for a period to end. It's in between snaps. Hey, if we're seeing this and you're getting this leverage, remember, this is what we want to do here. And that can carry over into the next period and it can allow you to have some more success. So I feel like the learning and the comfort is probably growing at an exponential rate relative to what they had last year. So I think you're seeing a more confident quarterback. I think you're seeing a happier quarterback, and that's going to lead to better play. There's no question.
And I think along the same vein, and that what you just said reminded me of that line in the Herald report from Andrew Callahan and Karen Garrigan that Mac would go to the coaches and offensive players, not just Mac, would go to the coaches about certain looks, and they'd say, "Well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." And the reality is, if that's your approach, if it's presented to you and you don't have a plan, it's already too late. The other thing I feel like is helping Mac's confidence, and it ties in O'Brien. Last year, it didn't seem like Mac had as much control at the line of scrimmage, and we've seen him this year often. You mentioned that hot route in red zone. I forget if it was yesterday or Sunday, but he makes the check off the blitz and ends up throwing the touchdown. And I would imagine as a quarterback, that in itself adds a level of comfort, just having more control at the line. If you see something, being able to check to something or change something that you're more comfortable with based off the look.
I think that's going to be a huge part of what they do this year is that they do give him that freedom. I mean, this time last year, what I was told was that they didn't want him making changes at the line of scrimmage. They wanted to run plays as they were called, and it was just to see things on tape. At least that's what the players had been told. And they knew at times that they were running plays into bad looks. And that was something they never did with Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels, from day one of rookie camp, was telling Mac Jones, hey, if you don't like what you see at the line, we want to give you the tools that you need to be able to put whatever it is that you feel like is necessary on the field in that moment in real time. Put it out there, put it on tape, and then we can adjust off of that. Like they didn't need to see certain plays run on tape, but I think because they were not only working with a new coordinator, but they were installing a new offense with a new language. They just wanted to get so rudimentary with everything that it took away, I think what you could argue is Mac Jones's greatest strength. So that is there. I do find it interesting, Alex. They've run a lot of quick game stuff. Now, they were very quick game heavy last year. When you look at it, he was 4th in the league. I just wrote about this after the first padded practice, because again, they had all these bubble screens working. They were 4th in the NFL when it came to swing passes, screen passes on quick drop. So no step drop, 1-step drop, 3-step drop. 4th in the league. Or Mac Jones, was 4th in the league, and he only played in 13 games. So that's not going to go away based on what we've seen in this camp. Bill O'Brien is going to work that stuff in, but it's not going to be like you don't have to build the entire plane out of quick game. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, it can be part of an effective offense. It can give you some free yards if this quick game is going to include RPOs, which I think they are sort of slowly showing us will be part of the plan. It can be part of the overall attack that Bill O'Brien is putting together. They don't have to get completely away from it just because it was something that they did last year. So there is going to be some consistency 2022 to 2023, but it's just going to be a piece and it's going to fit in with the rest of the offense. I think that has players excited as well.
So let's move on to the other quarterback. And I feel like the question about Bailey Zappe has been, is there quarterback competition? Can he catch Mac Jones, things like that? He hasn't been talked enough about like this. And I think he's earned the right for this in a bubble, Phil. How has Bailey Zappe looked, regardless of competing for the starting job or not? He flashed a little bit last year and then we didn't see him. Where do you think he's picking off after his chance last year?
I think he is very much more comfortable in whatever it is they're asking him to do. I also think physically, he is still very much still the same guy. And that, unfortunately for him, I think will always lead to on the field limitations. He ain't getting taller. I don't think he's going to get much better when it comes to things like throwing off his back foot, throwing off of on the move, off platform, changing arm angles. When he's had some wayward misses, and there have been, I would say that's really one stark difference between the performances of the top two quarterbacks so far. Bailey Zappe has had some serious misfires, not even really giving guys a chance, whereas those have been few and far between for Mac Jones. He had 4 incompletions today in competitive periods. 3 of them were pass breakups, and one was that overthrow we were talking about to Kendrick Bourne that was 45 or so yards down the field. So those things will always be limitations for him, and I think it's why he'll probably always be best suited as a backup quarterback. But I'm reserving judgment on Zappe to a degree here, Alex, because look at who he's working with. I mean, the offensive line is enough of a mess that you have 3 backups playing with the ones. So now Zappe has got 3 threes playing with him on the line. They can't pick up a blitz for the life of them. He took 4 sacks today. It's a really hard way to try to operate. We're probably not getting a true evaluation on Zappe because of who he's throwing to and who's protecting him.
So speaking of who he's throwing to, I actually just saw this. It's pre-recorded, but we'll break some news here. Jalen Hurd has been moved to the reserve retired list. So there goes that one for the Patriots. One of the guys that Zappe was throwing to. But you mentioned the offensive line there, and it's been one fully padded practice. They'll be back in pads tomorrow. But even today, even in the non-padded practice, like you said, you're starting to see the offensive line struggled. There were 2 or 3 throws where Bailey Zappe had to throw off his back foot because it was just he got the snap and guys were right in his lap and he had to get rid of the football, and that's obviously not helping him. Including mainly focused on the padded practice, but just overall, is there anything we can take from these first few practices so far in terms of the guys in the trenches, or is this all just Dietrich Wise and Christian Barmore look good, but you look at who they're going against, it's guys who may or may not make the team. Is there anything we can take from either side of the ball there?
I think Barmore at times to me has looked unblockable, and he had a sack in the padded practice where, it's immediate. It's off the snap. And to me, if there is a player who can enter into the conversation as elite at his position in 2023, it's Christian Barmore. And maybe you say, okay, Judon's already there and you may have an argument. I feel like elite at your position means top 8, maybe even top 5. And I think Barmore is close to being that talented. He just has to stay on the field and actually do it. So to me, he has looked good. He's looked strong. You'd love to see it a little bit more in padded practices, especially maybe the one-on-ones. We see him go up against, I'm sure David Andrews is a guy he'll see. It would have been nice. We'll see if Cole Strange can get healthy, but it would have been nice to see those two go at it a little bit. The offensive line to me is concerning, even though there has only been 1 padded practice, Alex, because I think the tackle position has the potential to get ugly very fast.
Great.
Even in the non-padded stuff, Josh Uche is running around Riley Reif on a regular basis, but it's not just Uche, who I think is good. It's Keon White. I mean, it's anybody that lines up across from Riley Reef is having a hard time. So I do
Jelani
think you can.
Tavaya got him twice the other day.
It almost hasn't mattered who's been lined up on some of
Right.
these guys. Connor McDermott and Riley Reef to me are ideal 4 and 3 tackles respectively. I'm not sure you'd want either one starting. And the reality for the Patriots is they've been the top 2 tackles out at practice the last 2 days because Trent Brown has essentially been given days off these last 2 days. So that's the arguably most concerning. No, I would say it's the most concerning part of what's going on with the team right now. I would say the other thing that's a little bit of a concern is Tyquan Thornton's disappearance from relevancy, but there's still time, and he's a young guy, so maybe there's a little bit of hope there. I don't know if you have any hope for him.
It's fallen. It's definitely falling. I want to ask you about a couple things you just mentioned there. First off, you talked about the tackle depth. Calvin Anderson, Bill Belichick was a little aloof on him before practice. Have you heard anything about his situation opening on NFI?
No, not other than what Belichick told us this morning, but it certainly didn't sound like he was that his return was imminent. Which when you're talking about, so it's NFI, but it's non-football illness.
Right.
NFI, we're usually talking about non-football injury. And anytime you're talking about a long-term illness, that sets off alarm bells, and you hope everything's okay with him. But this was somebody that they thought, I think, would be their 3. And so now with him not out there, now everybody has to move up. And again, maybe Trent Brown is the most important guy on the roster. I don't know if that's a situation that any team wants to be in. Outside of the quarterback position, is that guy the most important guy on your team? And we know how dependable or not dependable he's been over the course of his career. So they have left themselves in a bit of a pickle at one of the most important positions in the sport, and it's head scratching to me.
You talk about NFI ringing alarm bells. I found myself Googling Antonio Garcia today to just kind of remind myself of that situation. It was their 3rd round pick, I think, in 2017 and had some disease. I don't remember what it was, if it was ever disclosed, and lost a significant amount of weight, and he didn't play for a couple of years. That's like a worst case scenario. You hope it's not that, but those are the kind of things sometimes you see with guys on that list. Before we get to Thornton and then wrap things up. So you have Barmore as maybe like the next up elite guy on the defense. It's interesting because I've heard a lot of people talk exactly how you talked about Barmore about Kyle Duggar. So where are you at with Kyle Duggar?
I like Kyle Duggar, and I think he's a good player. I don't know if he's going to ever become a top 5 player at his position. Maybe I'm not giving him enough credit. The guy has a nose for the football. We know he can hit. I have some questions about his ability in the deep part of the field, and he might need to do a little bit more of that with them McCourty gone. I think he's got plenty of speed. It's just about, okay, does he have that instinct? Does he have that wherewithal when he has to play and be sort of that last line of defense? Can he be that guy? Can he be a true tight end eraser? I don't think he's really been that over the course of his career just yet. He's a little bit, he was an old rookie, Alex. So yeah. I think people still think of him as a young player when he's really not. And so I would worry that he has gotten closer to his ceiling than some others might be willing to give him credit for. That's why we do talk, and I'm sure you do it too. When we talk about the draft, we do talk about the ages of these guys, especially now that we're in this post-COVID era where so many of these guys have been in college for so long, and you're getting some 25-year-old rookies coming into the league. You have to take that into account when you're projecting out what they can be. So it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing with him contractually, because I think he's worth bringing back. That's generally speaking a relatively inexpensive position. So even though I don't think he's gonna be Derwin James, I do think he's worth keeping around, and I think you would like to start building a core of youngish in their prime Patriots that you feel like are your program guys, even if they're not superstars. I think there's value in that, and Kyle Duggar, by all accounts, is a good guy, smart guy, good locker room influence, even if he's not the loudest voice in the room. And so for all those reasons, I would work to bring him back. And it looks like, as we're sitting here, Alex, the Patriots have added a receiver Thyrick Pitts. Thyrick Pitts. And I'm going to apologize to Mr. Pitts in advance because I could be pronouncing his first name incorrectly. He's a receiver, and he looks like a big-bodied guy. So they get rid of Jalen Hurd, and they add Thyrick Pitts out of Delaware. And you know
Looks
what?
like he was
actually
with the
did
Bears.
make our. He must have had okay. So I've got a very brief scouting write-up from our pre-draft stuff if you want it very quickly.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
one-liner
absolutely.
essentially. 33-inch arms, very long for a receiver. 10-inch hands, 6'2", 201. Pitts ran a 4.45 and had a 39-inch vertical at his pro day. So big body, good athlete. I think he's probably one of these guys who got onto some radars because of what he was able to do at his pro day. Not a combine invite, seemingly, out of Delaware. You know, those are probably hard to come by. So, in all likelihood, as was Jalen Hurd, camp body, developmental guy. You roll the dice, see if he pops.
All right, well, while we're on the receivers, you mentioned Tyquan Thornton before, and you kind of asked, where I'm at with him. I almost feel like the team has to give him some more rope because the battle for the Z between him and Kendrick Bourne, like it's going to be one of those two players competing for the third snaps, but it's not a fast offense without him on the field. And I almost feel like that gives him a default edge. So he might get more of a leash to get better. There's that element. And then all of a sudden you have Demario Douglas coming out of nowhere, who is the only guy who's going to challenge him in terms of speed on the field. Do you think Thornton, even if he has a rough camp, maybe gets some deference in terms of, all right, well, you're fast, we need you out there? Or do you think Douglas could get to the point? It's still very early with him, but do you think it gets to the point where we could talk about him pushing Thornton just in terms of getting the speed on the field?
I do. I think it could get there. Now, I think you really would have to get an unbelievable push from Douglas to get there because Thornton was a second-round pick, and they want him to work out. I mean, they wanted desperately for N'Keal Harry to work out. N'Keal Harry was keeping Jacoby Myers off the field in their second season together in 2020, even though even by then, it was clear Myers was the one who was showing up and looked like he could play more consistently than Harry. But Harry was the first-round pick, and Myers was the undrafted guy. And so sorry, Jacoby, but you're going to stay on the bench here. We're going to try to get this first-rounder going. So you're going to get something to a similar degree with Thornton, I'm sure. And it is only 6 practices in, Alex. I just find the lack of targets to be eyebrow raising. And I just wrote about this a little bit for our Stock Watch piece today because he, again, on day 6 today, 0 targets in competitive periods. Day 1, he had 1 target. Went incomplete. Day 2, no targets in competitive periods. Day 3, he did get 2 targets. 1 was broken up in 7-on-7s. 1 went incomplete in 11-on-11. And I'm bringing these up one by one because that second target on day 3 in the 11s, I noticed Mac Jones, after it hit the turf, sort of turn to the coaching staff, the offensive coaching staff behind him, and do one of these and raise his palms to the sky. And far be it from me from putting too much into body language. I think it's worthwhile with Mac because he can be so expressive, and we were all locked in on the body language all last year. But since then, Alex, he has not been targeted by Mac Jones. The targets he's gotten have been from Bailey Zappe. So I find that noteworthy. He's been working with the backup quarterback, and the top quarterback hasn't thrown to him in 3 practices. So what do we make of that? Is there a trust thing going on there with Mac Jones? Is Bill O'Brien saying, hey, I just got here. Like, I'm sorry. I don't really care all that much if we drafted you in the second round. We're in the red zone where your speed is limited in terms of its usefulness to us anyway. It's interesting to me that a second round pick on a team that needs receivers has been so quiet, Alex.
And especially when they moved back from the red zone, because the red zone stuff, again, that's not his skill set. And that told me I didn't think that was a negative against him that he wasn't producing in the red zone. It was more like, okay, he's not going to take that jump. He might not be better than we thought he would be, but I don't think it's a sign he's worse. And then he wasn't producing. And it might have been the same rep you were talking about. This might have been on sevens, but there was a point at day 3 where he threw the ball to Thornton. I didn't see his immediate reaction after the throw, but he then went and spoke to Thornton. And it looked like he was giving him some sort of, this is where you were going, this is where I thought you were going. So did he run the wrong route? Did Mac not know? I don't know. But if you put that together with the palms up, like clearly some miscommunication there. You talk about the relationship between him and Mac. This is something that I had wondered coming in is they're in a spot, and I don't know that they needed to be in this spot, but this goes back to last year and we don't need to rehash all that. But ideally, with a guy like Thornton, even if he's having a rough camp, you're going to put him on the field and let him grow and give him a chance to grow. But you're also in a spot with a quarterback that you took in the first round that you need to see what he can do, and you need to allow him to maximize his skill set. And it feels like we're heading in a direction where those two things can't coexist, because if Tyquan Thornton's out there going through growing pains, that's actively hurting Mac Jones. And it's nothing against Tyquan Thornton, but if Mac Jones is better off with Kendrick Bourne, he's the quarterback. That's the position. That's the guy you need to invest in. So I don't know that we're there yet, where the Patriots essentially have to choose one or the other to focus on the development of, but Thornton's entering a really dangerous place, I feel like, if he lets it get to that point.
Well, and we're coming off a season. Again, we don't want to completely rehash everything that happened last year because there's a variety of reasons why things went wrong. But wasn't route running an issue for Tyquan Thornton last year, late in the season at times too? I mean, I think there was some miscommunication in terms of the routes that he was running then. And he ran a lot of routes. I mean, people remember that he was injured to start the year, but he ended up being out there a lot for this offense and really did not produce. And again, bad offense, rookie season, chalk it up to just general dysfunction.
Yeah.
But now that it's sort of bled into this year, apparently, it does make you wonder if he can be that presence that they need. This is let's call it what it is. I mean, this is a group of big-bodied receivers that should excel in contested catch situations that is, relative to the rest of the league, not very fast. When you're talking about 2 tight ends, DeVante Parker and Juju Smith-Schuster, it's just they aren't blowing you away with speed. Thornton could be that option where you're playing that Z roll that you're talking about, Alex. You send him in motion, the defense has to react in some way, shape, or form, whether they're sending somebody in man coverage or they're shifting and they're spinning their safeties or whatever it is to account for his speed. And if he can't get on the field because you don't trust him to do the right thing, you don't trust him to be in the right place at the right time, or the quarterback just doesn't trust him enough to throw it to him, then all of a sudden that element of your offense is taken away because there's really only one guy who brings it. That to me would be the concern there. Now, maybe Pop Douglas is the cure, is the panacea for what this team needs in terms of that speed element. But I think we probably all need to, as much as we all like him, we probably all need to see a little bit more from him before we start calling him the number 3 receiver on this team.
Yeah, the way I like to talk about Douglas and some other rookies who have popped early, especially guys, drafted lower, is he's done everything you could ask to this point. And there's a long way to go from here. That hardly means he's done enough, but it does feel like Douglas is one of these guys. I've kind of talked about Isaiah Bolden similarly. I still need to see a lot from him before I'm ready to, put him on the roster, but I don't know that he could do any more than what he's done at this point to impress. All right, Phil, before we let you go here, looking forward, it's a busy week, 6 practices in 6 days, expecting 2 or 3 padded practices here over the next couple of days. What are you looking for between now and the end of the week?
I'd like to see Trent Brown just get out there. Honestly, it does feel like, and I've kicked this around with a few people in the building, and it doesn't sound like this is contract related or really injury related. But Trent Brown hasn't practiced in 2 days, and we're used to Bill Belichick being the kind of guy where he really, man, loves his practices now. Okay, practice execution becomes game reality, and if you're healthy enough to practice, you need to be out there. That hasn't been the case with him. So I'd like to see him out there because they are bereft of talent at that position. And it would just make everybody a little bit more competent offensively with Trent Brown out there. All of a sudden, your second string tackles improve a little bit because everybody gets knocked down a spot. You don't have to worry about, okay, do we have half the defensive line rushing on this one or not? I mean, that was very odd to me that we saw that in that first padded practice. And I don't know why they did it. Bill Belichick was asked about it today. He didn't really say why they did it. He did say it didn't have anything to do with load management. Okay, great. Well, it's sort of what it looked like because they're down 6 offensive linemen and you're basically telling the defensive line not to try. So that to me is one. Where's Trent Brown? Where's he at? And listen, I feel the same way about Matthew Jude on it. Can they get anything done with this guy contractually to get him out on the field and practicing more? Not that I'm sure he needs it, Alex, because I think if he did, there'd be more pressure on him to be playing more. I think part of the reason he's not is because Belichick is probably fine with him not playing all that much because it probably doesn't matter all that much to him, especially at this point in his career. But those two guys getting on the field a little bit more is something I'll be looking for. And I am interested to see, can they mesh the run game stuff that we'll see with the pads on with the play action passing game that can help them be more explosive? It can't all be drop back jump balls to DeVante Parker. Some of it's going to have to be schemed. And this is where Bill O'Brien, to me, the spotlight shines on him, is because if you can marry those two things together, the run game with the pass, and you can get explosive because of your scheme, because of Bill O'Brien, that all of a sudden makes you a more dangerous offense. And it gives this offense a higher ceiling than I think a lot of people are anticipating.
He is Phil Perry from NBC Sports Boston. You can follow him on Twitter at Phil A. Perry. Phil, always love doing these training camp shows with you. Thanks for coming on.
Great to chat with you, man. Always fun. We'll talk again soon, buddy.
And we'll be back tomorrow with a new Sports Hub training camp podcast. Until then, I'm Alex Barth. Check out 985thesportshub.com. Subscribe to the Sports Hub YouTube channel. Have a good one, everybody.